They played you. They played all of us. For weeks WWE had the entire universe on its knees, begging, theorizing, losing sleep over one burning question: who is the masked man? They dangled that mystery like a carrot in front of a starving crowd. They let Paul Heyman scream, they let Logan Paul get destroyed, they let Braun Breaker's WrestleMania dream get shattered in seconds at the Royal Rumble, all because of some hooded phantom that nobody could identify. And then, right there on Smackdown, right when the tension was at its absolute peak, they unmasked him. And what did we get? A nobody. A random. An unnamed face that nobody in that arena had ever seen in their life. A man who had no business being on WWE television, who had no history with the Vision, who had no reason to be attacking anyone. The crowd erupted not in shock, not in excitement, but in pure, seething confusion and fury. Logan Paul looked like he'd been handed a participation trophy. Paul Heyman looked like someone had just told him his bank account was empty. The entire arena in Louisville went silent with a collective "what?" But here's the thing. Here's what WWE didn't want you to figure out yet. That man that so-called nobody was named Don Fio. And if that name means nothing to you right now, buckle up, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why that random unmasking on SmackDown was one of the most calculated, brilliant, and absolutely diabolical moves in WWE storytelling in years. Because Don Fio wasn't a nobody. Don Fio was a plant, a decoy, a pawn in the chess master who moved him. He's been hiding in plain sight since October. And when the real reveal came at Elimination Chamber in Chicago, Paul Heyman's face said it all. Drop a comment right now, did you see it coming? Because most of you didn't. And I've got receipts. Let's go all the way back to where this thing started, the Royal Rumble 2026 in Saudi Arabia. Roman Reigns had just won the men's Royal Rumble match, sending the entire WWE universe into a frenzy. The tribal chief was back on top, pointing at the WrestleMania sign, destined to challenge for a championship at Allegiant Stadium. It was supposed to be a night of triumph for the Vision, Paul Heyman's dominant faction. Braun Breaker was loaded in at number 2, a spot that Heyman had publicly screamed was a conspiracy by Raw GM Adam Pearce, and the expectation was that the dog would bulldoze through the match and give Heyman 2 celebration-worthy moments in one night. Instead, before Braun Breaker even reached the ring, a black-hooded figure lunged from the shadows and ambushed him. One vicious attack. One calculated stomp. And just like that, an exhausted, barely conscious Breaker was rolled into the ring right into the waiting arms of Obafemi, who eliminated him almost instantly. Braun Breaker's WrestleMania dream was dead before it even started. Paul Heyman, who had been watching from ringside with that trademark smug grin, completely lost his composure. He was heard screaming on live television, "How can that be legal?" That was Seth Rollins. And right there, he planted the seed that would grow into one of the most layered storylines of 2026. Because here's what you need to understand: Seth Rollins had a motive. A massive one. Back in October, at Crown Jewel in Perth, Seth Rollins had been in the fight of his life against Cody Rhodes. During that match, he suffered a torn rotator cuff, a real, legitimate injury. And who was responsible for the chaos leading up to that moment? Who had been destabilizing the Vision? Who had been turning Breaker and Bronson Reed against each other and against Rollins? The very faction that Rollins himself had built with Paul Heyman. The Vision turned on its founder, broke his body, ended his year. And Seth Rollins, the visionary, the man with a PhD in mind games, was not the type to let that go quietly. So when Heyman pointed the finger at Rollins after the Royal Rumble, a lot of people nodded. It made sense. The stomp, the athleticism, the black hoodie, it all screamed Seth Rollins. WWE even had reports circulating that they wanted the audience to believe it was Rollins all along. And for weeks, the mystery attacker kept coming back. On Raw, during a triple threat qualifier for the Elimination Chamber, the same hooded figure appeared and dropped Austin Theory with that same vicious curb stomp style attack, then melted back into the crowd before anyone could get their hands on him. Logan Paul and Bronson Reed sprinted after him. He was gone. The Vision was being systematically dismantled from the inside out, and nobody could stop it. Then came SmackDown. And what happened next was either the greatest misdirection in WWE history or the most embarrassing creative pivot of 2026, depending on who you ask. The moment is still burned into every wrestling fan's brain. Logan Paul had finally had enough. When the masked figure reappeared during the main event qualifier between Logan Paul and Jacob Fatu, something snapped in the Maverick. He wasn't waiting for answers anymore. He wasn't going to let this ghost haunt the Vision for another week. When he got his hands on the hooded figure, he clocked him with a right hand that would have put most people out, and then he ripped the mask off. And the arena in Louisville lost its mind. Not because of what they saw, because of what they didn't see. The man behind the mask was not Seth Rollins. It was not a returning superstar. It was not a legend making a comeback. It was Don Fio, an independent wrestler with virtually no mainstream WWE profile. A nobody, as far as the casual audience was concerned. Logan Paul was incensed. He stood there in the middle of that ring looking like he'd just been robbed in broad daylight, staring at this anonymous face, demanding answers that nobody on that screen could give him. Paul Heyman at ringside looked equally bewildered, genuinely confused, or performing confusion so brilliantly that even the camera couldn't tell the difference. Here's what WWE conveniently didn't announce in that moment, but what the wrestling internet figured out within hours. Don Fio is a professional wrestler who was trained by Seth Rollins. Let that land. The man behind the first mask wasn't a random at all. He was a student. A soldier sent by the general who was still too injured, at least officially, to show his face on television. Seth Rollins had been running a long con. He'd used one of his own trained disciples as a sacrificial decoy, knowing full well that WWE officials would eventually catch whoever was under that hood. He gave them a face that would confuse everyone, buy more time, and most importantly make the real reveal land with 10 times the impact. While WWE presented it as an anticlimax, it was actually an introduction, an elaborate setup for the main event. And that main event came at Elimination Chamber, Chicago, February 28. The United Center rocking with one of the most electric Elimination Chamber crowds in recent memory. The men's Elimination Chamber match was already a powder keg. Logan Paul, now GUSO's replacement in the match, was positioned as the biggest heel in the building. The fans in Chicago despised him, and WWE was leaning into it hard. He'd already survived multiple elimination attempts, being booked as the calculating, slippery rat that he is, when suddenly the atmosphere in the arena shifted. A masked figure appeared at ringside. Security swarmed immediately. Raw GM Adam Pearce, who had clearly been prepared after the Smackdown incident, had people in place. They grabbed the hooded figure and stripped the mask off. Another decoy. Pearce looked around, suddenly uneasy. Because if that was a decoy, where was the real one? The answer came from inside the chamber itself. A second masked figure had been waiting inside the pod, waiting in the shadows, waiting for the exact right moment. And when Logan Paul turned around, crack, the most precise, devastating curb stomp you've ever seen in your life. Logan Paul crumpled. Cody Rhodes, who had been watching with a knowing smile that should have tipped everyone off weeks ago, slid in and covered Paul for the pinfall. And then, the masked figure peeled back his hood. The house came down. Seth Rollins, the visionary, had returned. Shoulder healed. Mission accomplished. Master plan fully executed. He had orchestrated an entire months-long campaign of psychological and physical warfare against the faction that had betrayed him, and he had done it with the precision of a surgeon. Every attack, every decoy, every night of confusion and chaos, all of it had been leading to this singular moment, in front of a roaring Chicago crowd, with Paul Heyman frozen at ringside in what could only be described as complete and utter horror. The fans sang Seth's theme. He raised his arms. And Paul Heyman, the man who had tried to replace Rollins, who had let Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed destroy him, who had built the vision on Rollins' vision and then discarded him like trash, watched it all fall apart in real time. Now here's what nobody is talking about, and this is where it gets really juicy. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the Royal Rumble winner who was on a collision course with CM Punk at WrestleMania 42 for the World Heavyweight Championship. What does Roman Reigns have to do with any of this? Everything. Let's talk about the elephant in the room that WWE has been carefully dancing around. Roman Reigns is heading into WrestleMania as the conquering hero, the man who came back, won the Rumble, and chose CM Punk as his target. That's the headline story. But underneath it, something far more complicated is brewing, and it centers on his relationship with Paul Heyman. Because here's the timeline that WWE doesn't want you to draw a straight line through. Seth Rollins came back. Seth Rollins took revenge on the Vision, the faction that Paul Heyman controls. And Roman Reigns? Roman Reigns has been silent. Roman Reigns, who spent years as Heyman's most prized possession, who built the most dominant championship reign in modern WWE history with Paul Heyman by his side, has barely even acknowledged the chaos unfolding in the Vision. He won the Royal Rumble, pointed at the sign, and essentially went off to prepare for WrestleMania, leaving Heyman and the Vision to burn. On the most recent Smackdown before this recording, footage circulated of Roman Reigns completely ignoring Paul Heyman backstage. Not a cold shoulder. Not a brief nod. Nothing. Walking past him like he was furniture. And in WWE, when the camera catches that kind of moment, it is never an accident. Paul Heyman built the Vision as what some insiders have called his attempt to create a new bloodline without Roman. Braun Breaker as the new franchise monster. Bronson Reed as the enforcer. Logan Paul as the mainstream crossover. Austin Theory as the undercard workhorse. Seth Rollins as the genius creative force until they turned on him. And Heyman believed he had built something that could stand on its own, something that would make Roman Reigns irrelevant to his future. But injuries have gutted the Vision. Breaker is hurt. Reed is hurt. Rollins is back, but he's coming to burn it down, not rebuild it. And Logan Paul, while talented, is not the kind of superstar who carries a faction through a WrestleMania season on his back. Heyman's empire is crumbling, and the one man who could stabilize it, the one man whose presence alone makes any faction the most powerful in WWE, is Roman Reigns, the man who is currently walking past him without a word. You want to talk about a story? That is the story. The Oracle who sees everything, suddenly blind to the disaster unfolding right in front of him, and the tribal chief who may or may not be letting that disaster happen on purpose. Think about this. Roman Reigns is proud. We know that. He doesn't forgive slights easily. And Paul Heyman, by building the vision, by investing so deeply in a group of superstars who had nothing to do with Roman, essentially declared independence. He said, whether in kayfabe or in the meta-narrative that WWE storylines love to play with, I don't need Roman Reigns to be powerful. Roman Reigns heard that. Roman Reigns always hears everything. Is it possible that Roman Reigns quietly, subtly, passively allowed the vision to suffer? That he watched Seth Rollins, his former Shield brother, his former rival, someone who understands power dynamics as well as anyone in that locker room, dismantle Heyman's creation week after week, and said nothing? Did nothing? Because it served his purpose? Let's bring it back to the Smackdown moment that the internet hasn't stopped arguing about. When Logan Paul ripped that mask off and found Don Fio underneath, the reaction in the building was pure rage. Fans felt cheated. They'd been waiting weeks for a payoff, and WWE gave them a name nobody recognized. The comments sections exploded. Wrestling Twitter went nuclear. People called it one of the worst reveals in recent memory. But here's what the outrage merchants missed: WWE had planned this. Specifically, Seth Rollins himself, according to backstage reports, was part of the decision to use Furio as the Smackdown decoy. Rollins, who was recovering from surgery, who had been working from a distance, chose his own student as the fall guy. He sacrificed Furio to give himself one more week of cover, one more week of misdirection, so that when he showed up in Chicago, nobody could be fully sure it was coming. And he was right. Even people who suspected it was Rollins were thrown off by the Smackdown reveal. Even the diehards, the people who had been screaming at Seth since January, second-guessed themselves in that Louisville arena. That is not bad storytelling. That is elite-level psychological manipulation, both within the story and of the audience watching it. Seth Rollins, even while injured, found a way to be the most interesting character in WWE. That is a superstar. But here's where it gets complicated heading into WrestleMania season. Seth Rollins vs. Logan Paul is now the projected match. Because Braun Breaker is injured. Because Bronson Reed is injured. Because the original plan, Rollins returning to a blockbuster showdown with the man who sold him out, is no longer possible. And Logan Paul, for all his ability to generate heat and put on a spectacle, is not the WrestleMania opponent that this Seth Rollins comeback deserves. Don't get me wrong, Logan Paul in a WrestleMania match is box office. He brings mainstream attention. He's legitimately good in the ring and he knows how to perform on the big stage. But Seth Rollins returned from a torn rotator cuff, after being betrayed, after spending months as a ghost haunting the faction he built, that deserves a more personal feud. It deserves someone who was directly responsible for what happened to him. And almost everyone who was directly responsible is either injured or unavailable. So the question hanging over the road to WrestleMania 42 isn't just who Seth Rollins fights. It's whether the payoff to this months-long story can live up to the build-up. Because the build-up has been spectacular. Every week, the mystery attacker added another layer. Every attack was precise, targeted, methodical, everything you'd expect from Seth Rollins and nothing you'd expect from a random nobody. The reveal at Elimination Chamber, with the double decoy and the Chicago crowd singing his music, was genuinely one of the great return moments of the modern era. Now WWE has to deliver a match worthy of all that theater. So where does this leave Paul Heyman, the Oracle? The man who called Seth Rollins before anyone else. The man who helped build both the Vision and the Roman Reigns dynasty. The man who screamed that was Seth Rollins at the Royal Rumble and was dismissed as a paranoid schemer, only to be proven completely and utterly right. Paul Heyman is in free fall right now, and the most dangerous part of it is that he doesn't have a safety net. The Vision is a skeleton. Rollins is actively dismantling whatever's left. Roman Reigns is ignoring him. Adam Pearce, the Raw GM who Heyman has been battling in authority power games for months, is gaining the upper hand. Heyman is the smartest man in any room he enters, but right now, every room he enters is on fire. And here's the thing about Paul Heyman that makes him compelling even in defeat: he always has another play. Always. This is the man who turned ECW from a dying independent promotion into a national phenomenon. This is the man who took Brock Lesnar, a legitimately terrifying athlete with zero promo ability, and made him the most compelling character in WWE for over a decade. This is the man who found Roman Reigns at his lowest point in 2020 and constructed the greatest heel run in the modern era around him. Paul Heyman does not lose gracefully. Paul Heyman loses forward. He takes the defeat and weaponizes it, turns it into the next chapter of his mythology. The question is, what is his next play? Does he beg Roman Reigns for forgiveness? Does he try to recruit new members to the Vision, maybe Brock Lesnar, who appeared at the Royal Rumble and has been orbiting the Vision without fully committing? Does he wait for Logan Paul and Seth Rollins to destroy each other at WrestleMania and then pick up the pieces? Or, and stay with me here, does Paul Heyman do what Paul Heyman always does when things get desperate? Does he find somebody nobody expects? Because here's the thing. Every great Heyman story has had a secret weapon. In ECW, it was the violence and the unpredictability of the product itself. With Lesnar, it was the sheer physical dominance. With CM Punk, it was the authenticity of Punk's rebellion. With Roman Reigns, it was the head-of-the-table mythology and the bloodline story. Paul Heyman is at his best when he has a nuclear option, something the audience hasn't calculated, hasn't predicted, can't prepare for. Right now, the Vision is out of nuclear options. Roman is focused on WrestleMania. Rollins is coming for Logan. Breaker and Reed are on the shelf. Heyman is exposed. Which means if history is any guide, the most dangerous version of Paul Heyman is the one we're about to see. Here's what I need from you right now. This story is far from over. WrestleMania 42 in Las Vegas is going to be one of the wildest nights in WWE history, and the fallout from the Mystery Attacker arc is going to ripple through that entire show. Roman Reigns versus CM Punk. Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul. The future of the Vision. The relationship between Heyman and Reigns. All of it is interconnected, all of it is explosive, and all of it is happening because a masked figure showed up at the Royal Rumble and stomped Braun Breaker's dreams into the dirt. So drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Who do you think Heyman's next move is? Do you think Roman Reigns intentionally let the Vision suffer? And most importantly, was the Smackdown nobody reveal a creative disaster, or the greatest misdirection in years? If you're new here, welcome to Ring Rumble 1. We don't do surface level takes. We don't summarize what just happened and call it analysis. We dig deep, we connect the dots, and we bring you the stories behind the stories. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video with every wrestling fan you know, because this conversation is just getting started. The mask is off, but the game has only just begun.